story right now is you do have to do, I don't know, a little bit of JavaScript to do full drag and drop. We're not going to win a horse race directly with those frameworks we're running on WebAssembly today.
Welcome to Just Blazor Programming. Yes, this is me. I'm still here. I cut my hair real short this time so I can let it grow forever and ever, or at least for a few more months until I need a haircut again. Anyways, on to the topic. JavaScript versus Blazor, or as I probably titled it, will Blazor dominate JavaScript? And the quick answer is no. It can't. It won't. Logistically, it's kind of impossible for it to dominate, JavaScript. And that's all there is to it. And that's all you wanted to hear. That's the end of the video. But if you want to hear why I think this is the case, even as someone who promotes Blazor, well, stick around. We got some interesting factoids and stuff to show you. Just give me a moment while I set up. So why do I think that JavaScript will never concede the crown to Blazor, no matter how hard Blazor tries? Well, it simply has to do with the fact that JavaScript is way too ingrained into what web app development is for modern day programs, including Blazor. It is so important that Blazor went and took the time out of its day to develop JS interops, which if you want to know how to use is right here. And they, basically allow you to use JavaScript libraries inside your Blazor application. And then you don't have to worry about JavaScript anymore once you've incorporated it in through the JS interop, but you still have a JavaScript library within your program. So I don't think that JavaScript is something that will ever go away or will ever be taken over by Blazor or really any technology unless something crazy happens in the future, which it's kind of hard to imagine. But hey, let's look at some other reasons why I think that JavaScript will continue being basically the king of web app development, despite Blazor making big strides towards it. And also getting to the greater point being like, why even bother with Blazor if that's going to be the case? So here's my first reason why. The very first reason why would be that JavaScript has way too much support. In fact, way more support than I believe .NET has overall when it comes to, libraries and such, things you can add to your project. I'm going to show you an example here right now of just a small, little part of showing off why I think this. So these are NuGet packages, NuGet.org. Now, if you don't know what this is, NuGet is basically how we incorporate .NET packages and stuff like that into our C# programs and the web applications. So if you were to find a library that you want, you would, for that application, you would go into NuGet to find it. And there are over 276,000 packages in here. Pretty good. But let's go to JavaScript and see how many packages we got to offer here. In this case, I went to the GitHub and then see how many repositories we have for JavaScript projects. And there are over 1 million of them. So there is over, 5 times as much support, 4 times as much technically. Yeah, there's technically as much as 4 to 5 times more support, I would say, than NuGet has for JavaScript stuff. Now, this is not really a scientific analysis. It's just saying, how easy it is to find a library here for whatever it is you need for a project. So like having that drag and drop feature would have been nice to have for C#, but they decided to let JavaScript handle it because there are actually plenty of libraries that do it for you. And in fact, I have a drag and drop tutorial using this with JS interops and help you, take time to see it, maybe. But anyways, you see there's far more support for JavaScript stuff than there is for, .NET stuff, according to this. What other reasons do I have for believing that JavaScript will continue being the top dog in perpetuity, most likely, for web application development, even though Blazor is, a very good competitor to it? Well, the other thing is that the two frameworks that compete with Blazor, namely React and Angular, are also backed by large corporations. Now, if you don't know, Blazor is backed by Microsoft. So letting you know, that's just, this is the master of Blazor here. But Angular is backed by Google and supported by Google. And Meta used to be Facebook. Back when Meta was Facebook, they created React, and Meta now supports React. So even though Microsoft is higher on this food chain than Google or Meta, it's still competing against two of its, biggest competitors within the tech company, umbrella. The only one that supersedes Microsoft is Apple. But if I were to compare and contrast Microsoft and Apple, Microsoft has its fingers in way more pies than Apple does when it comes to technology. So, take that with a grain of salt. It's really competing against, at least in this space, between Google and Meta. What other reasons do we have for Blazor, for me believing that Blazor's not going to win the trend? Well, as you can see here, I have Google Trends. Now, you might think this might be a little bit biased considering, Google is in the running here. But, I think Google Trends is decent enough when trying to search for just common interest in Blazor, Angular, and React. As you can see, Blazor's way down here at the bottom. It is way too new and not that mainstream just yet. I'll get back to that later. But as you can see here, React is all the way up here. It is the number one compared to these three, and Angular is somewhere in the middle here. And each one of them has their, their peaks and their troughs of interest here and there. What you should take from this graph is that Blazor is kind of here. Now, I didn't put JavaScript in this because I didn't think there was much of a point. If I'm going to compare JavaScript stuff to Blazor, it's going to be the things that are closest to it, and it's going to be Angular and React, considering they're all component-based frameworks, blah, blah, blah. You get this. You've heard this spiel from me if you've been watching my videos. So here's another reason why I believe that the interest level of Blazor is also not a very good, It's not a very good indicator of, whether or not it's going to dominate JavaScript. In fact, it's probably against it. And let's go one step further. Whenever you have an issue with some programming, if you've been programming long enough, you probably encounter a little site, a little known site called Stack Overflow. Now, Stack Overflow is another metric of interest in my opinion, because this is where you're going to get some help from time to time when you have issues. The first thing you're going to do is write, this thing has a no reference exception, what do I do? Or whatever it is in some language. And then you're probably going to pop up on Stack Overflow, and then you're going to hopefully find the answer to your question, at least something very close to it. And Stack Overflow is going to be your best friend. If you don't know this, please understand, use Stack Overflow whenever you can. Now, with that being said, we're going to look at the, just how many Blazor questions there are. That's how I'm going to determine the interest level in Stack Overflow and the resource level that is available to you. According to this, there's a little less than 8,000 questions for Blazor. Now, again, I believe this has to do with it being very new. Blazor came out in 2018. They didn't really it was not going to pick up steam right away. It's going to take a while before people incorporate the technology and actually learn to ask certain questions and then find the solutions to those questions. So in this case, we got a little less than 8,000. Now, let's just look for JavaScript in general. JavaScript can include React, Angular, and any other library that there could be, and things that you probably never have heard of. So with that, there are over 2 million questions. So JavaScript has a giant slice of this pie when it comes to Stack Overflow and the resources offered for you. So this just tells me that, hey, JavaScript has been here a lot longer than Blazor has specifically, and you're going to have a lot of questions that have been available to programmers discovering and tinkering with JavaScript for all the time since JavaScript came out in 1995. But, it's a bit of a cop-out because Blazor, you will also be asking C# questions, and if I write C# here in these brackets, I'll probably get a little closer to that number. So I'll just write C#. Yes, watch me screw this up. Oh my God, I actually did. So this is a vehicle, right? This thing here, that's a vehicle. Are you kidding me? Yo, am I a robot? I didn't want to do that. So the good news is that when it comes to C#, you have, 1.5 million questions here, and Blazor makes up a pizzly little portion of that. So if we just add that on to this, we get maybe 1.5, 3-ish questions. We'll just say, hey, it's getting there, but it's not there yet. JavaScript has the lion's share of all of this. Well, moving on to something else that I have seen, whenever we talk about technologies, we want to talk about the money. Why would you be doing programming with something that doesn't have any money in it? I don't know. Maybe you just love it so much. I'm not that kind of guy. I like money, and I hope you do too. So we're going to look at some salaries from this website that I've been using before, payskill.com. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to React.js and Angular, there's not that much information, and I don't like that. But this is like an easy resource to use. But according to this, the average base salary based on what I see is nothing. It's 94K. Same thing with Angular, 89K, so roughly about 90K. C#, on the other hand, 68K median, with the high end being 100,000. So this one has more information on it for just C# because I couldn't find any Blazor specific things here. But if you are going into a project, it's going to mostly be C#, and they might have a Blazor component to it. So why, at the end of the day, do I want to promote Blazor if by looking at everything here, Blazor's kind of, creak at a paddle, without a paddle? I can't say the word because it's YouTube, but you know what I'm talking about. Does it have even a chance, giving you the lifestyle you probably want as a programmer, making that 6-figure salary? Well, I'm going to say yes. And the reason why I say yes is not because I have a vested interest in it being a Just Blazor programming channel, but also because I believe that Microsoft is making great strides into Blazor. I also understand there's a few reasons why there is a little bit of friction when it comes to Blazor and C# in general, and that is the barrier to entry. It is far easier to go from learning an object-oriented programming language like C#, which Blazor needs, in order for you to actually use it, and then go into a scripting language than it is to go the other way. A scripting language is far simpler than it is to go into an object-oriented programming language. Now, you can have an argument for TypeScript being like, oh, it's strongly typed, therefore it's a little closer. You might have a point, but it still incorporates many of the JavaScript framework liberalities when it comes to programming, where C# does not. And if you do go from JavaScript to C#, you will encounter the .NET ecosystem, which is completely different than anything you've encountered in the JavaScript ecosystem. And it's probably a lot harder because there's a lot more things you gotta understand before you actually can use it effectively. So there's a higher barrier to entry when it comes to it. But that doesn't mean that C# is out. And it also doesn't mean that Blazor has no future. Microsoft is heavily investing in Blazor, because if you don't know, in Q2 of this year from Maui UI, we have Microsoft coming out with something like this. Now, this is going to be the competition for like Ionic, React Native, things like that, so that you can build actual applications on the phone natively through only the use of C#. So this is going to be the Xamarin replacement. If you have not used Xamarin, it's kind of clunky too. Xamarin is basically the Razor of mobile development for Microsoft. So that's how I choose to view it. But I think Blazor is their way of trying to fix the issues of the past, things they've been using. And I also believe Blazor is going to be something that's going to replace Razor in the future, because, you know, in order to use Razor, you're kind of stuck in the past still, I think. And to go forward and to go compete against these other technologies, you need to adapt. And you know who else would agree with me? If I go on this website to look at all the software developers that there could be, I'm just going to go, the one thing I'm really interested in is the actual programming language. So if I go all the way down here, right here, there's roughly between 7 to 8 million .NET developers, and they mostly use C# according to this. So what does that mean? It means that we have, you know, a pool of people that have C# who probably have to have learned JavaScript or, you know, some sort of that in order to become full stack developers. But now there's a resource that allows them to use C# as both a front end language and a back end language, which allows us to create web applications much more seamlessly with a familiar programming language. You know, once you understand how Blazor components and stuff work, you won't have to switch between languages as often. And in fact, you will do 95% of your program all in C#, because if you want to use those libraries, you have JS Interop, and then that does require a little bit of JavaScript mods, but not enough that it will stop you from making any applications. So this is one of the reasons why I believe Blazor will become a market force. Sure, it's not going to take over JavaScript. I don't think it can. And I believe Blazor has accepted this because it has JS Interops incorporated into it to make it easier for you to adopt JavaScript libraries. So now the strength of your competition is now your strength, because you have access to everything that they do. So think of it that way. Not only that, but you don't have to give up your C# skills, your .NET programming language, in order to go and learn something else that's entirely different to create a fully functioning, very similarly competitive performance-wise application for a browser-based web application. And then later, once we get our hands on Maui, once it releases, then we'll be able to create native applications as well. And when it hits the mobile development scene, we're going to get a lot more interest in Blazor because of the sheer number of mobile app developers here. So even though they're probably not, some of them might be using Xamarin, I doubt they're all going to be using it. I think, you know, there is some C# language being used in here because, you know, there's a lot of games out there for mobile development. A lot of them made in Unity. Unity uses C#. Just saying. And now, once Maui comes out, I believe there'll be more interest in Blazor. And Blazor just came out in 2018. These other languages before JavaScript, all these stuff came out a lot earlier than it. You know, they had at least 10 years before, you know, they got really into their stride. Maybe it took them, I don't know, 5-ish years before they started seeing more mainstream appeal. And then, you know, it took a little bit of time after that. And unfortunately, in the meantime, the competition was Razor and the competition was Xamarin, which weren't, you know, they couldn't really compete because the performance was just so bad compared to these other two frameworks. So Blazor fixes that problem, and Microsoft is invested in this because they want Blazor to be the framework that allows you to create web applications and mobile applications and basically be the C# answer to JavaScript frameworks like React and Angular. So that's why I think that despite Blazor never going to be first place, even Microsoft is in first place here in this whole thing. you're still going to have a good time. As a C# developer, the future does look bright because you will have a great tool in your disposal. And then guess what? If you are, one of those 6 million people, right? 6 to 8 million people, developers, you have influence in corporations. You have influence on how you develop the project because, they pay you to make sure whatever project they want to build works. So because of your influence and because of your knowledge in Blazor, you will continue to bring Blazor into the forefront of these companies whenever there's like a new project to be added. And you want to continue maintaining the network of developers you have. Namely, if you are in the .NET space, you want to continue relying on that .NET expertise. So of course, you're going to go into the technology more familiar to them. Basically, you want them to gravitate towards Microsoft technology, .NET technology. So with all that being said, there's one thing that I didn't touch upon, and that is the actual, the way I navigated the salary thing. I didn't really give C# enough credit. In fact, I didn't really give any of these technologies enough credit because when you go look for a job, you don't look for a job in isolation. You don't look for a job that just says, I need a React developer and there's nothing else. No, when it comes to looking for a job, you can be a full stack developer who has knowledge in, all 3 tiers that you need to. You could be someone who needs cloud development, which I think is very important nowadays. Cloud development is becoming more and more ubiquitous when it comes to other corporations adopting it. So if you don't have cloud development, you're going to be very left behind. And I also believe that regardless which technology stack you go for, you should try to be a full stack developer, or at least as close as possible to one, because you will have to work in different parts of the program, regardless if it's on the front end, the back end, or in the database. A little bit of knowledge goes a long way, and a little bit of experience in all 3 of these avenues will help you open more doors. So yeah, you're right. The price of a C# developer is kind of low compared to these other 2. But when you go look for a job, you're not looking for a job that's just C#. You're probably going to be looking one that has, a front end using something, at least nowadays, at least until Blazor, gets more up to speed. You will have something that works on the front end, a framework that's on the front end. Back end is probably .NET or something like that. And then a database could be whatever, SQL. Usually if it's a .NET program, it's going to be SQL. If it's not, then it's probably going to be MySQL or even MySQL with a .NET program. It doesn't matter. I've seen all kinds of different configurations. But what I'm saying is that looking at that pay scale thing was a little bit misleading, maybe because I wanted to make and emphasize a point, but also, get to this point saying that don't be scared of those prices because a software developer is worth a lot as long as you have different avenues of experience, especially when they coincide together, neatly. So with that being said, I do still want to promote Blazor. And I hope you don't think that I lied to you this whole time saying that, Blazor is going to be, the future, whatever. I still believe it is going to be the future. I also understand that Blazor does not operate in a vacuum and your competition exists and has a giant piece of the market when it comes to web application development. I also understand that Blazor is still very niche. So if you're just trying to look for a job just on the laurels of Blazor, then perhaps you should rethink your strategy and try to incorporate more .NET stuff into your tech stack and probably venture into some other frameworks as well in the meantime. But if you're someone who's already in the .NET stack, you've already done Razor, something like that, then Blazor would be good to learn because this is going to eventually be the next step that you will take, especially if you're working some much older frameworks in .NET, because that's the whole point. Microsoft is trying to push people into .NET 5, .NET 6, .NET 7 when it comes out, etc., etc. I'm just letting you know that it's just the trend. Right now, my channel is trying to help you get into a niche technology. There can be great rewards at the end of the rainbow, but we still got to go over that hill. You know what I mean? Or whatever the arc, I guess. I forgot what it's, the apex of the rainbow, whatever. You know what I mean? Anyways, that's the end. I'm not going to ramble on anymore. Thank you for watching and I hope you keep subscribing. We're almost at that 500 number. It's pretty crazy, just a couple of months. So, help me get up there. And if you want to see me do more tech videos, don't worry, they're coming out. I just, sometimes you gotta rant a little bit, you gotta rant. And also enjoy my new haircut. It's gonna be here for a while.